Today in the EU, the climate ambitions of the new EU Commission. All eyes are on Teresa Ribera. President von der Leyen tasked the Spanish politician with steering Europe's green transition while ensuring its competitiveness. There's a lot of prestige attached to the role, but Ribera sits as one of the few socialists in a predominantly conservative college of commissioners. Commissioners she might have to compromise with during the next mandate. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU. I'm joined in the studio by Donagh Cagney, Environment Hub Editor at Euractiv. Hi, Donagh.
Hi, Giada.
You're in Strasbourg, about to leave. We've had an announcement of the College of Commissioners this week. What do you make of the team of nominees leading environment and energy portfolios?
Well, it's a lot to take in because there's quite a few different individuals who are going to be working on climate and energy and the environment in the Commission for the next 5 years, assuming they pass the European Parliament hearing, of course. First up, and kind of head of the table, if you like, is Teresa Ribera, who's a Spanish socialist, is a very high-profile politician. She's going to be the executive vice president within the Commission for a clean, just and competitive transition. And she has 3 standard commissioners, if you like, who she'll be relying on to actually make things happen in practice. First of all, there is Dan Jørgensen, who's a Danish socialist. He is going to be the Commissioner for Energy and Housing, which is a new thing. Then on environment, there's Jessica Roswell, a Swedish centre-right politician. She's with the EPP party. Her job title is Commissioner for the Environment, Water Resilience and a Competitive Circular Economy.
Let's start from Ribera. As you've said, she's been presented as one of the 6 executive vice presidents. Her mandate encompasses priorities that politically have hardly been merged together. What are they?
Yeah, it's a strange merger, and I think it's not something that people were expecting. So over the summer and spring, Ribera has made no secret of her desire for a similar kind of role in the Commission that would focus on climate and a clean, just transition. So exactly like in her title. What she's got is a little bit different. Climate is in there. Industrial strategy is in there. Energy is in there. There's also competition as well, which was a bit of a head scratcher. But the rationale behind it is that basically if we want these large European industrial champions to be able to compete on a global basis, then we need more flexibility in terms of how much money companies are given from the public purse to support them to grow, and also a bit more lax merger rules as well.
And I think it's interesting that several politicians in Spain described Ribera as the most powerful commissioner the country has ever had.
Es seguramente el mayor peso en una cartera que ha tenido nunca ninguna española.
Now, is this true? Do you find this statement accurate?
No. I mean, she's clearly one of the most important commissioners in the college, for sure. I mean, worth just taking a step back and remembering that within the College of Commissioners, every commissioner from the so-called most important to the least important, each has 1 vote and each vote counts equally. And she will have commissioners reporting to her, but at the end of the day, they're established politicians. So the position of executive vice president is very important, but it doesn't give absolute control over her colleagues. It's a very broad portfolio, which does come with power. But some people are wondering whether she can avoid getting bogged down in some of the details. Competition, for example, is a huge and very high-profile role. I mean, the Vestager, as we know, for the last 5 years has made it her own and has been a very important portfolio with geopolitical considerations into it as well.
Ribera shared her vision with us a few months back. How do you see her combining her values, her beliefs, with the mandate that she's been given?
One of the interesting things my colleague Nicolas Kormeyer wrote in the hours after the announcement was that she has this socialist vision, which is very progressive, as I was saying, and about kind of working for people on the ground. A few of the commissioners she relies upon are from the EPP, from right of centre, so on environment and climate. And perhaps she'll need to work with Séjourné, who's from a liberal tradition as well. There is that balance, so that might put a bit of a brake on some of her ambitions. One interesting point is Ribera is very much in favour of this the idea of a just transition. So
Mm-hmm.
the idea that we decarbonize, but we also make the world and society a fairer and more equal place to be. Historically, socialists are people who were more liberal who wanted to achieve that. One of the things they could do with competition law was to be a kind of a trust buster, break up these big companies that have too much market power, give power back to the consumer, to the ordinary, Joe Soap on the street.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the task she's been given is to allow more of these kind of giant corporates to exist. And how she will marry those two conflicting objectives will be really interesting to watch.
Right. Ribera is the only left-leaning politician in this team. Does this hide VDL's political will to, in a way, hamper the Green Deal?
When you read the mission letters, you can see that von der Leyen is fully committed to decarbonisation, so fully committed to aggressive, rapid reduction in carbon emissions in time to get us to net zero by 2050. She wants to do that, but not much more.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to do it in an economic way that will be good for industry, that will be good for business, that will be good for economic growth. And of course, there are references to protecting people. There's phrases like the just transition. But when you look at Ribera's mandate in the mission letter in terms of what she has to do, it's mostly framed in terms of her social mission will be achieved by lowering energy prices, which is a very salient topic over the last 2 years because we all know what happened in 2022 and the impact that did have on households. But on the other hand, it's something that, von der Leyen will be very happy to see from a pro-business, pro-industry point of view as well. And a lot of the work has been done there already.
Mm-hmm.
So some people, some observers reading these mission letters and putting them side by side and joining the dots say that perhaps Ribera has been given a lot of power, but the more socially transformative part of what she wants to do, she may find harder to achieve.
And in order to do so, she will have to cooperate with the latest addition to the team, Stéphane Séjourné, a loyal Macronist, a liberal. He took the seat of Thierry Breton, who was swapped last minute this week. How can we expect the relationship between these two to work out?
These guys are seasoned politicians, so I think they'll do what they need to do to make a success of their job, so they should work it out. I think the area where Ribera and Séjourné will be working together most closely on is this clean industrial strategy, which needs to come within the first 100 days of the Commission's mandate. The big question is really going to be, does the EU have a bigger budget to actually fund this industrial clean deal? So, paying for new factories to set up, supporting new technology developments, et cetera, et cetera. And that really comes back to a much bigger question as to whether EU member states are prepared to see a bigger EU budget, either by greater contributions or where the discussion is now, common debt being issued by the EU. And as we know, that's still very much an open question.
Yes, a question that the Nordics in particular will not love to hear. Swedish Jessica Roswell has been appointed as Commissioner for the Environment, and her appointment has raised criticism. What's the fuss about?
So some environmentalist NGOs would not be particularly enamored with Roswell's track record. Firstly, she doesn't have much of a track record on environment, and I think she said so herself recently. Her most recent experience is as a kind of a minister for EU affairs within the Swedish government. And of course, that gave her huge exposure to Brussels and the decision-making machine there, particularly during the Swedish presidency. But she said herself that, she has a lot to learn on the environment. Sweden, in the last couple of years, hasn't had an amazing track record on climate and decarbonisation. There's been a feeling the last couple of years, maybe they've lost a bit of momentum on the current government. And then the big issue is forestry.
Yes, I've seen the issue of forestry come up time and time again, but only on a superficial level. Could you explain exactly where the issue lies?
So the Nordics, not just Sweden, but also places like Finland, have a lot of forests, and they've a long history of exploiting those forests commercially, producing material, particularly wood and supplies for the paper industry, all kinds of things like this. They would fiercely defend their right to use these forests. And there's a huge debate as to what is and is not sustainable forestry and what you can and cannot do. Clearly, it's not quite the same as restoring nature and, leaving things to rewild. In that context, and given that, Roswell until now defended the Swedish position on forestry, whether she can marry that with a European role where she's meant to protect the environment, including forests. Some are skeptical that she'll be able to do that credibly.
And finally, we get to Dan Jorgensen, who will be the Commissioner for Energy and Housing. He is the first Commissioner for Housing. How influential can we expect this role to be?
It's a very influential role. Historically, the Energy Commissioner was not the most desired position. It wasn't seen as a top job. Obviously, the last couple of years have put energy back in the spotlight in a very big way. And I think we've a greater realization of that, what we just need to do to the energy sector to decarbonize. So there's going to be a huge amount of very high profile work there. It is interesting that the energy and the housing have been combined. In July, when von der Leyen made her pitch for re-election to the European Parliament, she did say that she would appoint a commissioner for housing. The reaction to this was, well, that's a very kind of popular thing to do because, many Europeans are getting hit by access to affordable housing. But at the same time, there's only so much the Commission can do. So the way she's done it is to merge it with two. So Dan Jorgensen will have a DG Energy, so the civil servants working. There won't be an equivalent DG for housing, but there will be a kind of a special task force, I think they call it. And the logic between putting them together is that a lot of what you can do in housing is not just supplying more accommodation, but doing better quality accommodation. And that means making it more energy efficient, more warmer in winter, more colder in summer, just more comfortable and energy efficient housing. So he has quite a few files under the Energy Commissioner, which would work well in that sense.
And speaking about files, of course, we just got the missions of the commissioners, but what can we expect in terms of energy and environment policy moving onwards?
It feels like more of the same, essentially. Essentially just more of the same.
More of the same.
Yeah, but I wouldn't underplay that by any means because the same has been pretty crazy for the last 5 years. It's been furious lawmaking, coming up with, I think we've spoken before about this Fit for 55 package. Huge amount of legislation to decarbonize Europe by 55% by 2030. Well, they're already thinking about 2040, what the carbon reduction target should be. It's likely going to be around 90%. And if you do that, then during this mandate, you can need to come up with a huge amount of additional legislative packages, a bit like 55, Fit for 55, but now Fit for 1990. So expect a lot going on there. Energy markets, and particularly electricity, there needs to be real changes on the ground in terms of more renewables out there, massive expansion of the grid, more interconnections, new technologies, a lot of things that needs to happen practically, so coming on the ground. So a lot to be done there as well. Maybe one part that's interesting as well is the environment file. Over the summer, the chatter was, the Green Deal is struggling. There won't be much more to do in environment. The reality seems to be becoming a bit more nuanced. Roswell does have, quite a wide brief in terms of what she's expected to do, but it's a bit more human facing, if you like. It's nature for human welfare's sake rather than nature for nature's sake. So, people like clean air, they like clean water. So Roswell is charged with working on that. They want nature to work for the economy as well. So she needs to do a circular economy act so we can reuse things and increase our independence and have more jobs and recycling, et cetera, et cetera. And then the really interesting thing, which von der Leyen flagged in a speech last week, is this idea of nature credits. It's almost monetizing nature in a sense, as in if nature gives us benefits, we need to quantify them and we need to pay the people who are preserving nature to allow that to continue, which obviously could be very interesting for farmers as well. So it's a really, really pragmatic, hard-nosed, center-right approach towards preserving the environment.
Thank you, Donagh.
Thanks, Giada.
I'm Giada Santana, and this was Euractiv's Today in the EU podcast. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news, sign up for our podcast newsletter, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite streaming platform. It will really help us spread the word about our work. This episode was produced by Miriam Sanz de Tejada and I. See you tomorrow. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.